Hello, good afternoon. My name is Daniel Kestenbaum, and I am appearing live from Brooklyn, New York. To give a little bit of background, I professionally involve myself in the world of rare Hebrew books and manuscripts. I run a boutique auction house and have done for almost 30 years, specializing in rare books and manuscripts. And for the next 40 minutes or so, I am going to display for whoever is joining this broadcast, I'm going to display a selection of books. I looked around my gallery space and I found, I'm looking to my left, and we have about 25 volumes and sort of thematic, and I hope you're going to find them interesting. At the same time, what I'm going to do is hold things up, open them up, and so that you'll hear me explaining what the book is, the content of the book, and you'll see the book. So anyway, we're going to start with this little item. And given the state of the world we're living in, which we all know how very much it's changed, I thought this little book, which I'll open to the title page, it goes from left to right because it's English. It's a calendar. I'm just going to ask my son, though, because I'm seeing it as backwards. Is it forwards on another screen? Is it the right way around? Anyway, it's a lunar calendar. And is it the right way around?
It's not a delay.
Huh?
It's not a 10-second delay.
Okay.
It's fine.
Is it good? Is it the right way around? Okay, fine. I'm seeing books backwards, but apparently you're seeing it the right way round. So what is the significance of the calendar? Frankly, given, as I say, the uncertainty in our world, what does bring certainty is at least to my mind, the continuity of our heritage, our Jewish heritage. And that is, there's comfort in knowing the calendar, the pause of Shabbos every 7 days, festivals coming up, the cycle of the Torah readings, and that's our Masorah, that is our classic tradition. And this little calendar, which was printed, if you see at the bottom, again, I'm seeing it back to front, but at the bottom it'll say Newport. That's Newport, Rhode Island. And this was printed in 1806. And it is a Jewish calendar. So if I turn to any one particular page, you'll see, for example, on this side, in the year, so it was printed in 1806, and it's the dates for 1807 when the Jewish festivals will appear. Tied to the corresponding secular date. This particular copy actually was the person who owned it signed his name over here. I made a marker, and his name is Jacob Cohen. In fact, we know who Jacob Cohen was. He was from Virginia. In fact, he writes at the back here, a nice inscription at the back, how it was given, this volume was given to him by his father. He's actually Jacob Cohen Jr. He was from Virginia, later in Maryland. He was involved in the Jew bill which made Maryland famous, but that's another story. But anyway, this is a really charming calendar, and you have to remember, in 1806, there were hardly any Jews in the United States. We're talking about less than 5,000 Jews. I mean, in 1850, there probably was, as I remember, maybe 50,000. It was only from 1880 and onwards, that's when numbers ballooned massively because of immigration from Russia, from Eastern Europe. But this little calendar of Newport, Rhode Island, Newport, Rhode Island was essentially the borough park of the United States at that time. And this calendar is no different from what we'd use today. Anyway, moving on. So with the notion of continuity, or it's not so much continuity, the continuum The Continuum of History. This book I have here, we're going to go back a few centuries. This is a Sefer Yuchsin. You see at the top line, Sefer Yuchsin. You see in bold letters below, let me try and hold it and point it out over there. It was printed in the town of Constantinople. This book was printed in 1566. And it was written, it's a history book. It was written by the famous Abraham Zacuto. Here, I'll turn a few other pages. It's entirely in Hebrew. And Abraham Zacuto, who actually is famed for his navigation skills, Vasco da Gama used his charts. He was in Spain. He lived 1425 to 1515. He wrote an almanac that was used by explorers. As I say, Vasco da Gama being the most well-known. He was actually, Abraham Zacuto, he was in the service of the King of Portugal. He had been expelled from Spain after the expulsion in 1492. He went to Portugal, was what can I say, the court scientist, or certainly one of them. And then he had to flee Portugal. He moved on to Tunis and settled in Jerusalem, which is where he died in 1515. But this volume, this is his history of the world. It's a chronology of the Jewish world, as in a chronology of the sages of the Oral Torah. And it also represents countries through the world and the scientific achievements that each country has produced up until his own time. And again, this was printed in 1566. This is the first edition. The next group of books that I've selected are what are known as ethical tracts. They're pietist works. Chovos Halavavos is a classic work of ethics. Here it is. This was written, this particular edition, yeah, again, you can see the title page. This was printed in Constantinople in the year 1550. To this day, this is very popular, particularly before Rosh Hashanah, a time of introspection, a time of teshuvah, and the work focuses on specifically those ideas of, again, it's all, I'll show some pages, it's all written in Rashi type. It's the first Jewish system of ethics. It was actually originally written in Arabic. The author, Bechaya ibn Pakuda, is 12th century. He wrote it in Arabic, and later Yehuda ibn Tibbon translated it into Hebrew. And what else can I add to this? There's the colophon page. That's the last page, which sets out who were the typesetters who put this together. This is a time where every single letter, again, I'll bring it close. Every single letter was set by hand, page after page after page. It was an extraordinary, laborious process. And the reality is, it's beyond the content of the book. There is tremendous artistry in the printing arts of this. The way it is perfectly aligned. Let me take that out. The way that it is perfectly, the lettering is perfectly aligned on each page, perfectly balanced. All right, let's move on. I need to know the time. The next volume, also in the same, so can you leave it here so I know the time? The next volume, in the same genre of texts, can you see it? It's a Sefer HaChasidim. Fine. And this was written by Yehuda HaChasid. He also lived, although this is printed, again, let me bring it up and you can see over there, Nitfas Ho Bologna. This was printed in the town of Bologna. This was printed in 1538. This is the first edition of the work. Again, just to hold up some pages. And again, it's an ethical work because the author was part of the 12th century movement of the Hasidei Ashkenaz. It's very much tinged with mysticism, how to dress, how to speak. There's a section on how to select one's spouse. But this particular copy is pretty remarkable because beyond, again, this finely balanced text, an earlier owner has done this to it. And again, has done, let's find more of that. He has taken the work there again, and he's taken his pen and he's erased aspects of the text that he finds insulting. So for example, this page I'm looking at. This is, if one sees a Gentile in a dream, and it's relating to essentially how to live one's life in a perfectly balanced state of holiness, and the goal being not to disparage the Gentile, but essentially only view things which do not misalign one's sense of holiness from that state, and therefore seeing people or dreaming about people who are not the ultimate goal of perfection in terms of holiness, that would disturb one. So this is what to do if one has a dream about a Gentile. Clearly, an earlier owner found this insulting and has effaced that text. We could probably find out who the owner was. I've actually just come across this book recently. I haven't done a lot of research on it, but over there, he signs his name in Latin. It's probably the censor. All Hebrew books through the 16th century had to be approved by the censor who worked for the church, and they would there were times they would not approve of the printing of a particular text, and there were times that they would approve, but here again, they would approve it, but they would do that. They would take all copies and efface any word that they found to be offensive. Interestingly, how would this censor be so knowledgeable about a text that even observant Jews, learned Jews today would find challenging to learn from? And the answer is that very often these censors were converts, Jews who had converted from Judaism into Christianity, and they had an agenda, and that agenda was against their past, and they tended to work for the church. And yeah, this is, let's find a page again. This would be the result. Yeah, something like that. The last book in this series is a extraordinary classic, and that is Sha'arei Teshuvah, which was written by Rabbeinu Yonah. This actually appeared, this is the first edition, 1506. It was not printed with a traditional title page. The title is there. Sha'arei Teshuvah, Sha'asa Chassid Rabbeinu Yonah Zal. But title pages developed over a period of time. It was really around this time that title pages as we know them, as we know them to look, as we know them to be, this is around that time that would have taken place. But in this particular copy, this particular edition did not have a traditional title page. The previous owner, you see down here, has made notes. That is an early hand. And that is the kind of thing that people like me get excited by and try to decipher the writing, and ideally try to learn. Here, there's more of it over here. Let's see over there. Sorry, I'm just being passed a note. What is the note? Okay. There are questions which are coming up, and I'm going to do all of the questions at the end because I haven't done a Zoom before, and the idea of looking into the camera, holding a book, reading a question is a bit too much juggling for me. So I'm going to do my piece, and then at the end, my son is showing me questions that are coming in. Hopefully there's time, and then I'll deal with questions. Anyway, so I was just saying there, again, there's marginal notes, and this is a tremendously significant book, the Shari Teshuva. Again, something which is studied Rosh Hashanah time. I mean, down to our own day. In the 20th century, Rav Yitzchak Kutner was was very passionate about the Shari Teshuva. Any followers of the Mussar school are very devoted to this text. Okay, let me move these over here. Sorry, they can stay there, whatever you like. And then next book, I'm going to need you to pass, or just put a pile over here. Okay, so this is also in the realms of, I mean, very much in the realms of philosophy. This is the Moreh Nevuchim, the Maimonides Classic Guide to the Perplexed. This is not the first edition. This is printed in, well, let's see if I can point it out, hold it, and not lose my yarmulke. And okay, here we go. Over here, it says Nitpas. It's actually slightly rubbed out. Nitpas Besavioneta. And then, let's see, in very tiny letters over here, I've got a little pointer, very tiny letters there. If you can see, I'll bring it forward. It says Shin Yud Gimel, which is 1553. That's when this classic Moreh Nevuchim Guide to the Perplexed was printed. The first edition was much earlier. Again, I'll just show some pages from it. It's actually one of the first edition of Maimonides' text was in 1473. It's one of the very first Hebrew books printed. Printing began famously with the Gutenberg Bible, which was around 1440. It took a couple of decades for Jews to, I want to flippantly say, get their act together, but it was more to the point that this incredible new discovery of printing, it was run by guilds, and Jews were not allowed into these guilds. So this is an entire book that can be discussed as to how Jews began printing. But the first books were, Hebrew books I'm talking about, began at around 1470. I say around because those first books, which we believe today were printed in Rome, don't carry dates. And it's inference today. Bibliographers have now learnt and come to the conclusion 1470, and for around 8 years onwards, they were printed in Rome, and then subsequently there were thousands of Greek and Latin and English texts in this incunable era. The incunable era was the beginning of printing till the year 1501. Incunable means, it's a Latin word which means cradle. These were, as in, they are the cradle books. It's the cradle of printing. And among the thousands of secular books, there were, it's believed today, 175 individual Hebrew texts. Some of these exist in multiple copies today, as in, when I say exist, as in they have gone through the passage of time and have come down to us. Some exist only in a single copy, some just fragments of a copy, and some we know of, there are titles that we know were printed and there is no copy at all. And you can therefore obviously inference from that, here, I'll put this down, inference from that there were also texts that we don't have today. We actually don't even know what they might have been. And that's the fascinating topic of looking into the history of the book, not just the content of the text, but also how books came to be, who printed them and where, specifically in terms of Jewish history. All right, to move on, the same vein of philosophy, we had Maimonides Mourinho. And by the way, I should also mention, of course, Maimonides lived much earlier. His years were 1135 to 1204. And he was tremendously controversial. Today, he is the Nesher Hagadol. But in his time, there was a lot of controversy in terms of his approach. He very much leaned on Aristotelianism, which he felt was not appropriate for a traditional Jew. Today, centuries later, we have moved to a whole different direction, and the Rambam, Moses ben Maimonides in Latin, is a tremendous figure in our Masorah. And the Guide to the Perplexed is one of his absolute classics, let alone tremendous numbers of works on halacha, his Mishnah Torah. Anyway, enough for Maimonides. I'm going to skip a couple of centuries, and the book I am holding now if I said something about title pages, this is a gorgeous title page. Here, it is, let's see if you can get the whole page here. It is the Mate Dan, and has an unusual title as in Kuzari Sheni. Yeah, let me see if I can do this a little easier. No, I can't hold and point, but you'll have to, the top two lines in bold, Mate Dan, Kuzari, and then it says Chelek Sheni. What is that supposed to mean? As in the Kuzari volume 2. The Kuzari, of course, was the classic work of philosophy, which was, let me just close it, which was written by Yehuda Halevi in 1506, and it was his response to the Karaites and the traditional rabbinic response to Karaites, who, as Yehuda Halevi saw it, were taking liberties with the traditional views of pious Judaism. The author of this particular text, his name is David Nieto. He lived in London. I don't think I mentioned this actually. Again, at the bottom, you see Londerish, that is London. And then the year, it was printed in Shnas in the year Dalad Ayin Taf, as in the word Da'at, Da'as. And that year, going backwards, Taf Ayin Dalad is 1714. David Nieto was the Sephardic Chacham of London at the time, and in the year Da'at, the year 1740 year, he felt there was a need for knowledge, or a kind of a restart, one can say, of knowledge of how a believing Jew needs to orient himself. Why was it printed in London? Why at this particular time? Why is Nieto leaning back to the Kuzari of the 16th century? Because Nieto felt that just like there was a need for the Kuzari in the 16th century in response to the Karaites, in Nieto's time, there was a need to have a response to Marranos, to Spanish Jews who had re-emerged from hiding after the Treaty of Utrecht in, I believe it was 1550. Spanish Jews realized that there was a home for them elsewhere in Europe where they could live their lives openly as Jews. And many of them moved to Amsterdam. From Amsterdam, there were many trading routes. There was a lot of ties between Amsterdam and London. And many of these Jews found themselves in London, and they were used to a free-thinking approach to Judaism. And Chacham David Nieto, from his perch in the Bevis-Mark synagogue in the center of London, which, by the way, still exists and still is open for prayers, maybe not right now in our COVID situation, but is open after 200 and I think almost 300 years. Nieto was, he was surveying the scene of London Jewry, Anglo Jewry, and he felt that the that the Spanish Jews who had arrived in London needed some correcting. And in fact, I should most importantly show the book is entirely bilingual. It's Hebrew and Spanish all the way through. There was the Spanish returnees were remarkable people who brought a tremendously, refreshing approach to Jewish communities, because it also challenged existing Jewish communities, challenged them in terms of their thinking, their belief system, which I guess had gone unchallenged. And many of these returnees, they were very sincere, but they had questions, and their questions couldn't just be answered through platitudes. And people like Manasseh ben Israel in Amsterdam, and in this case David Nieto, they took up the challenge, and it was to the benefit of all. So the next book, where are my books? Over here. Okay. So moving into a different era now, and I'm looking at the time as well. Moving into a different era, this is a tremendously exciting book. This is, now here I think I can hold and point at the same time. So the title is over here. This is the Safer Nephesh HaChaim. This is printed in Vilna, and this is printed in the year 1824. This is the first edition of the classic text of Lithuanian Jewry, and that is by Chaim Volozhin, Reb Chaim Volozhina, the founder of the Volozhin Yeshiva in 1802. And this is a work of philosophy which is absolutely beloved to this day. And it was a response also to the Hasidic movement. And it was a response specifically to the Alter Rebbe's Tanya. It incorporates ideas from the Tanya, but very much moves into a framework that in which it personified the identity of Lithuanian Jewry. Now, this particular copy, see, this is why rare books are not just based on the text, as in the knowledge gained, but the actual copies. If I move this towards the camera, if you see these stamps, these ownership stamps, they're actually from the Hebron Yeshiva, which was the Slobodka Yeshiva that had moved from Lithuania to Palestine, and they settled in Hebron. And this book is stamped. I think there's a clearer one. The yeshiva was called Knesset Yisrael in Hebron. Tragically, and then after the 1929 riots in Hebron, they fled and they moved to Jerusalem, where it is to this day in, I believe it's Givat Mordechai, the neighborhood in Jerusalem where they thrive. It is one of the most significant Litvish yeshivas in the world. And also what's interesting about this particular copy is, if I spoke earlier about a text that someone had defaced violently and knowingly, here, let's see where it is. I was looking through this earlier, or here it is. We have these burn marks. It's actually over a few pages. You see, it starts there, and it continues there, and it continues there. And frankly, I think this is nothing more than someone who was studying this book, and his cigar ash fell here and kind of annoyingly burnt through the text. Then what did he do? What did he subsequently do? Along here, I'll again bring it forward, he wrote along the side, probably had another copy, and he wrote along the side the text that was missing from the burn mark. And you see it on each page there and there. And actually I compared this to another copy, and that's in fact exactly what he did. The text on the side are the portions, the handwritten text again, are the portions of the printed text that were lost through the cigarette burn. So if we had a Nefesh HaChaim, again, that's the title page. If we had a Nefesh HaChaim, it would be only just to pull out a Tanya. This is the classic work of Chabad Hasidis. Sadly, I don't have a first edition. The first edition was 1797 in the town of Slavita. But this edition, which is, let me hold it up again, Vilna, and yes, it says down there, again, I'll bring it forward, the year 1900. This is a very significant edition because although it's not necessarily old, it's not necessarily rare, it's very significant. Here's the first page, and it's significant because this is the edition that established the, I think the matrix is the right word, the classic layout of text of all subsequent editions of the Tanya. The Rebbe Rashab, Reb Shalom Dov Ber Schneerson, asked a chassid of his, I don't remember his name, to carefully go through earlier editions of the Tanya, weed out any, here again, I'll hold it up, weed out any typographical errors and bring a typographic clarity to this fundamental text of Chabad philosophy. You see an earlier owner has made notes along the side, and in fact, they've left their signatures along here. Let me find some. There is here, over here, there's an earlier owner. Again, it's faint, it's in pencil, and I'm reading back to front and upside down. So it says here, Zalman, well, let me turn it this way. Oh, here, Zalman Yitzchak Melamed. Maybe they're descendants of his today. They know who he is. Someone's written over here, Shaykh, as in belonging to, Menachem Mendel. Well, I think there are a fair number of Menachem Mendels in the Lubavitch community. We don't know his last name. Here is a signature I could read. It belongs to Habacha Menachem, again over there, Menachem Mendel. Looks like Stessin, looks like over there. Here it says Chevra Tomchei Tamimim Lubavitch. And that's, by the way, one of the wonderful things that I certainly enjoy. Any particular book, looking at who the previous owners were, it became their property, it became part of their life. So rather than seeing this as sort of, oh, you've kind of scrolled all over my nice clean page, I love seeing a text, a volume, which has this, because I will spend time trying to figure out who was Menachem Mendel Stessin. And this Chevra, what did I say? Chevra Tomchei Tamimim Lubavitch. So that's the classic name of all the Lubavitch yeshivas, but which one might this have been and where? I mean, the handwriting is contemporary with the printing of the book. Anyway, enough with that, Tanya. Moving on. Where are my books? Oh, here. So another Hasidic book I have here is Likutei Maharan. This is the classic text of Breslav Hasidis. This is not the first edition. The first edition appeared in 1808, but this is the first edition that appeared in Jerusalem. Again, can you see? Yeah, it should be clear. And the bottom in large letters, you see Yerushalayim. And again, this is 1874. And this title page, I don't know what the lighting is like and how the camera is picking this up, but this is all gold. It's all printed in gilt. And anything which is from Jerusalem certainly has a different level than a book that might have been printed in Warsaw or London or Venice. It's Ir HaKodesh Jerusalem. Here, there's his, on the title page is his name, Rabbi Nachman of Breslav, and it records his grandfather, Nachman Horendenker, and who is a very significant Hasid in the first generation of disciples of the Baal Shem Tov. In fact, he was a let me think. He was a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. And anyway, that's I'm trying to bring balance to all the things that we're looking at. And further balance is, if we go from some Hasidic books back to a classic work from the Lithuanian world. This is the first edition of the Chofetz Chaim. This is how Yisrael Meir Kagan got his name, by this book, the Chofetz Chaim. This is Vilna, 1873. And this is his classic text on Lashon Hara, the notions of, here, this is the first page. Here, you see over here, the laws of forbidden speech. The way to bring sanctity to oneself, to one's environment, is, as the verse says, to preserve, how does it go? How do we translate that? Preserving one's lips, preserving the whatever comes out of one's lips is going to affect someone else. Make sure it's words of consolation, it's words of reinforcement, it's words of pleasure, as in simcha, but not words of rechilas, not words of gossip and lies. And that's what this classic book is all about. This is the very first edition, of which since then it's only appeared in 1873. The Chofetz Chaim died in 1933, and since then this is in everyone's home, or at least it should be. Another book which is an absolute classic and is in everyone's home, but this is the first time it appeared. This is the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. This is the Code of Jewish Law. This was printed in 1864 by Shlomo Ganzfried. And this is, I would say today, the most popular halachic work which has ever been printed. It was printed in Ungvar, which at the time was Hungary, and today is Ukraine. I can spell what it's called today. I don't know if I know how to pronounce it. It's something like Uzhhorod, and I'm going to use those books. And anyway, this is the very first appearance of something that subsequently has completely changed the way that we conduct our observant traditional lives. Then let's see. What is the time? Okay. So I think I have a few more items here, and I think I have time to make it, if you leave it up so I can see it. So the next book I want to bring out, only because it's very impressive and it's going to fill up the entire screen. It is this volume, this giant volume. I guess what I could do is pull out from my drawer. I don't have a ruler, but I don't know. Look at my fist. And you can see as I move it up how big this volume is. It is super heavy. It is in a 16th century binding. Many of the books I've showed are in later bindings. The pages, the actual contents, the interior of these volumes are all the originals. So when I say a date, if I said 1506 or 1874, the pages are then. The binding might not necessarily. Oh, thank you. My nice son has brought me a ruler. So here, if I show it, well, from the top, this is it's a 12-inch ruler. So holding it from the top, that's That's how much book we have. The reason why I'm going on about this is because it's actually the first biblical concordance. This was printed, I'll just open it to the middle. Oh, I don't want to bend it back too much because it's in a spectacular binding. This is the first, as I say, first biblical concordance. Let's bring it up. Printed in 1524. Let's turn to a title page. Could you help me just find the title page over there? And it was printed by the great Daniel Bomberg. Now there is an impressive title page, and that is the classic Bomberg title, the arch, the architectural arch. An early owner, aside from producing a gorgeous binding, has also these clasps, top and bottom, to keep the book closed, and he's created these thumb tabs which go from bottom to top because the work is alphabetical, and the thumb tabs, which are very old and very fragile, they indicate each letter going through the alphabet. I love books like this because even from the outside, you are holding the 16th century in your hand. And then I have a couple of others in a different genre. Very few Hebrew books are illustrated. It's just kind of not our thing, but now I'm going to show you when it is our thing as in terms of Jewish literature. So this is a book, I'm just trying to get the title page, here it is. Here, this book is Mashal HaKadmoni. This is a much later edition. I'd love to have the first edition, which was an incunable edition. Let me just look over here. Yes, the first edition was 1491. And what is remarkable, it's a book of fables. And it's illustrated. It shows a couple of pages, like over there. And over, let's find another, oh, I love this one. Let me move that out of the way, this one. This is very untypical for Jewish literature. It's animals. It's kind of a version of, it's the Jewish Aesop's fables. And except in this case, the animals are very well versed in Torah learning, and they debate the value of virtue in terms of Jewish life, Jewish living. Here's another nice illustration. And so therefore you'll have in here, the lion he dreams of a pilgrimage to Eretz Yisrael. There's a picture and a fable of birds who are seeking to make up a minyan. I think I showed that one. Or a deer who is very motivated to daven, to pray 3 times a day. It's quite a remarkable book. Mashal HaKadmoni, it was written by Yitzchak ibn Sahula centuries earlier. And that is a different, there are actually 2 works in this one volume. That's Sefer Tapuach, but here's the title again for Mashal HaKadmoni. Let's find it. There. Okay, and one other illustrated book I wanted to show, which really is remarkable. So what this is a, I'll just open it random. This is a Chumash, it's a Bible, the Pentateuch, that's, I've opened to Parshas Vayigash. It's a regular Chumash, it has a commentary at the bottom, and the commentary here is, it has 2 title pages. Here's the second title page, and it tells you the commentary is by, over here, Yedidia Shlomo Norzi. He was an Italian. Yedidia Shlomo Menozzi. Maybe not Norzi, I don't know if his don't know much currently about the author. That is his last name, and the implication is Menozzi, is that's kind of where his Heimat, his family home was. But what's the reason why I'm bringing it out is it has a second title page, or an opening engraved, extraordinarily elaborately engraved title page with the title again. By the way, the commentary is known as Minchas Shai. As in the gift of Shai, Shai being the initials of the author's name. But the point is these very elaborate vignettes. I'm going to bring it close, and they're biblical vignettes. You see King Solomon, and you see Miriam and her tambourine. But what is absolutely remarkable is this one. And again, I'll bring it close. This is an illustration, an engraving illustrating the story of the vision of the Valley of the Dry Bones. And so there you see the bones turning into life. And up here, which is truly remarkable, let me just find it again. So I'm pointing, yes, up here is a pictorial representation of God, of the deity, in a classic chumash with a parish, a classic parish Minchas Shai, and yet it's highly unusual. And I actually have seen copies of this where people have, they're not going to efface it, but they've cut it out. They were troubled by this. It is also a reflection, I'll open this up, but the conversation is for another time. It's a reflection of Italian Jewry as well. The Jews of Italy very much had their own perspective in terms of a humanist way of thinking. They were very open to the wider culture while remaining steadfast Orthodox traditional Jews. And this is an example of their open-mindedness. Okay, I'm going to take up my full hour. There are 12 minutes left, and I just have a few books left. Another area I'm going to move into is a classic area that people love to collect, and that is Haggadot, Passover Haggadahs. I just have two, primarily because I only have two accessible to me at this time. And so this one, this is the original binding. It's an Indian edition, printed in the town of Pune. And you can make out the Hebrew at the top. There is what, so again, let me point. Haggadah Shel Pesach over there. Then in English, the Institution of Passover over there. And the rest of the text is a language called Marathi. Marathi was the language, the primary language of the Jews of India, as it still is to this day. The community is still there, primarily in Bombay. Pune is a city about 100 miles from Bombay, 100 miles inland. And this is a Haggadah they produced in 1874. The reason why it is something special is, aside from the interest, of course, I should show some interior pages, Hebrew on one side, Marathi on the other side, no different from an art scroll book, which would have Hebrew on one side and English on the other. The classic traditional text with no changes, but in the beginning, there are some things which are pretty extraordinary, and that is by way of illustration. So for example, the first illustration here is Moses and Aaron. This is the illustration I absolutely love. I'll hold it this way, because what you're seeing here, let me just remind myself, it's the it's kind of progression of events of baking matzah. But the people baking matzah are pious Jews, Indian Jews, and you can see wearing traditional Indian dress. Their features are not exactly Western features, as to be expected, and it's a unique illustration. There are thousands of editions of the Haggadah, which is why it's such a popular area to collect. And each edition has its own nuance, either in terms of the text, commentaries, nuance in terms of illustration, because the Haggadah is one of the few books, Jewish books, in which it is permitted to illustrate. You wouldn't have an illustrated Bible, for example. But a Haggadah, they are illustrated. And based on where that edition was produced, you see the flavor of that part of the world. And this is really the most exotic example. Here is further pages. This is the order of the Seder, the 10 stages of the Seder. And you see the Indian Jews sitting around the table. There's another one over here. And it is very much actually a favorite of mine. And seeing if there's, I believe that's it. So moving on to another Haggadah, that is the Arthur Schick Haggadah. It comes in this elaborate box with a velvet lining, and the volume itself, which I've taken out earlier, is over here. This is the very first appearance of the Schick Haggadah. This was produced in 1939, 1940 in London. I'm going to just open at random a colorful page. Let's find a full page over here. Anyone who is even marginally familiar with this kind of artwork, you will immediately identify it with Arthur Schick. This is his classic style. And this particular copy was the very first appearance of the Schick Haggadah. Here, that's a gorgeous illustration. There were only 125 copies of this volume that was produced, as stated in the back, or the front, because there's an English front and a Hebrew front. Right, it says here, yes, 125 copies produced for the United States of America, gives you the number, signed Arthur Schick, and signed by the editor, Cecil Roth, who was the great British Jewish historian, resident in Oxford and later in Israel. And it's printed on vellum, which is a very difficult feat, and it is a spectacular, beautiful, illustrated Hebrew book. Oh, look at that Lamed. That is extraordinary. Arthur Schick was Polish born, thank you, and he was born in Lodz, and then he moved to the United States. He lived in Paris, he lived for a short while in London, he moved to the United States. He was a fierce anti-Nazi, worked tremendously hard through his artwork, developing cartoons, which he partnered with mainstream publications in order to show the this is from its earliest appearance, from Nazi Germany's earliest appearance, to show the viciousness, the violence that was to come. But he also produced secular texts, but he was very much his heart and soul was as a Jew who very much loved his people. He was a passionate Zionist, and he died unfortunately too young. I think he was in his I think he was 57 when he died. And he died in New Canaan, Connecticut, around, I think he lived around the time of the century. I think he was born in the late 1890s and he died in the late 1950s. So the last group of books, I see I have 5 minutes till the top of the hour. And the last group of books that I've selected really is because I want to, it's a reflection of the times that we are living. I don't need to make a speech about the unprecedented times that we're living through and the challenging times. We should now be used to what the times that we are living in, and we should try and find a way to embrace these times, not necessarily, clearly there have been terrible tragedies, but for those who are well, there's a reason why we're living through these times. For whatever reason, we have been selected by fate, by God, by Kodesh Baruch Hu, to live through these times, and it's important to find meaning through these times. What I do know is one of the ways that observant Jews find meaning at all times of stress and distress. They find comfort through Tehillim, through the book of Tehillim. And I have a few volumes of the Tehillim here, which I was going to pull out. This is an early binding. This is a very early edition. Just checking the date. Yeah, 1576, printed in Wittenberg, a Tehillim. It's very beautiful font. It's kind of a Gothic look to the Hebrew font, but it hasn't really been used. Jews use their books, and this Tehillim has not really been used. And the reason why is because it wasn't really produced for a Jewish audience. It was produced for a Christian audience. Hebrew was one of the classic languages, as it still is, Greek, Latin, Hebrew. And there were many Christian Hebraists in the 16th century who had a great passion for the Hebrew language, and they would produce, there's no more classic example of the Hebrew language than the Bible, and no book is more beloved within the Bible than the book of Psalms. So I want to balance this edition of Tehillim with this one, because this one, here, this is a Safer Tehillim, printed in Vilna, printed in the year 1824. And this version is very well used, very heavily used. You can tell, particularly on the corners of the pages, those are thumbs that have turned page after page many, many, many times, to the degree that I don't see teardrops, but teardrops emote from this book that I'm holding, and that's the Tehillim of that we are so taken by. So when you use a Tehillim like this, that is, well, it's printed in 1824, so it's 196 years old. One can, aside from communing with God as one recites Tehillim, one also communes with all previous owners who have also devotedly said their Tehillim from this volume. Here's another example from a different part of the world, same period of time. That one was Vilna, again, this one was Vilna, 1824, and this is Constantinople, 1836. See over there, Constantinople, and there's the year in Roman numerals for some reason. But what's striking about this edition is it has a translation, and the translation is, if I bring it forward, in the Rashi script over here is Ladino, Ladino being the lingua franca of the Jews of Constantinople. That is then followed by the next Tehillim, which is a Tehillim printed in, as you see in big red letters there, Yerushalayim, in the year 1875. And again, there's nothing more meaningful than saying one's Tehillim from a book printed in Jerusalem. And at that point, I'm going to end with my last volume, and then I'll look at questions. Okay, could you list them for me somehow? So the last Tehillim I have is actually my own, and that is a Tehillim, and there's a reason why I'm presenting my own. But first, let me show you what it is. It's a Tehillim printed in Rhode in Germany in 1896. And the reason why it is beloved to me is because it was given to me by my dear mother, may she be well, who is 85 and lives in London. And she, where did I write this? Oh, I wrote it over here. When her mother, my grandmother, passed away, then this Tehillim was found in my grandmother's bedside drawer. This was in 1990. And my mother gave this copy of the Tehillim to me. But more than that, it also has a signature over here, which says R, the letter initial R, Broya, and that is my mother's mother's mother. Rebbetzin Rika Broya, a blessed memory, was the wife of my great-grandfather, Rav Yosef Broya. So this copy has gone from Rika Broya to Hannah Schwalbe to Gabby Goldblatt to Danny Kestenbaum, and I hope to pass it on to one of my children. And the reason why I'm bringing it out is simply because each and every person creates their own history. Each and every person's day is a day that needs to have meaning, of course. And once that day is finished and we move on to the next day, their previous day is the history, it's part of the story of one's life. And one needs to ensure that one's life is a purpose-driven life. And the legacy, there's a material legacy for one's life, and that we are all mortal. And we are going to move on, hopefully after a fulfilled and meaningful life, but we are going to move on and we're going to leave our possessions behind. And everything that I have shown were previous owners' possessions that I am now currently the custodian until the next owner. And my point basically is, and I'll end with this, is that this little Tehillim tells the story of my personal family history. And I believe it's very important that each and every person ensures that they create their own personal family history. So I'm going to end at that. Shai, there are questions here. Okay, let me just look at what they are. I'll tell you what, at least I should read them out. I'm not sure to what degree I can address them. Number one, can you discuss the historical reasons for the differences between the Ashkenazi and Sephardic pronunciations? Two, is Ashkenazic pronunciation closer to pronunciations of the Torah texts? Three, what does Nefesh HaChaim mean? And four, oh, this is the great question. Where do you find these books? So, where do I find these books? Well, as I think they said in Mission Impossible, if I tell you, someone has to self-destruct. That is my business, and that is what I have. I hate using cliches, but I'm kind of a Indiana Jones of the Hebrew book world. That is what I seek to do. I look out for these things everywhere. Because I've been doing this for quite a long time, people know where to find me. But the reality is if you are looking for books like this, aside from contacting me, you can reach me through my website. This is not to take away from JLI, who are kindly and gracious enough to host me. This is their production, so I don't want to advertise. But if you're looking to find these kinds of books, you can contact me through my website, which is kestenbaum.net, kestenbaum.net. But there are other people around. There are dealers, booksellers in Brooklyn. There are in Jerusalem. There are one or two in London. And that is, make contact, discover where your passions are. And you will find that actually a lot is available and it's not necessarily pricey. In terms of, not to ignore the earlier questions about pronunciation, I think I'm not going to comment on this because this is slightly out of my area of expertise. Professor Google is the place to go. and have him type your question in there, and I'm sure there are some very interesting answers. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that at 5 minutes after 6 here in Brooklyn, New York, and I wish everyone well, and thank you for your attention.